All right, this is the Product Analytics UX PM sync for August 9th, 2023. I had a couple of things on the agenda for today, just looking at a couple of MVCs and talk through the user experience of those, any questions that the team might have. So I'm going to share my screen. As I find the right tabs. And I'm going to start with the filter by user type ID. So this is the front end part of the issue that we ran into on some internal team dashboards where we aren't asking users for cookie consent because they're internal apps. And so all users are reporting as the same user. So we have a backend fix for that so that you could filter out those anonymous users and see only users who are given consent for tracking. That lets us then make sure that we're showing unique users, especially in that default dashboard for audience. So having a way to filter those out, I think, is an important use case for this chart or for this dashboard. So we wanted to add some user experience or a way to do that filtering just within the dashboard itself as the MVC. So this isn't even a wireframe, but simply a directive of add a checkbox here about excluding anonymous users. And I pinged Lorena to ask for some UI tech help, especially in the help tab or the little modal that'll pop up explaining what that thing is. But definitely open to ideas for other ways to make this better, even for this MVC. And then longer term, as we get feedback, we can think about a different way that we filter this kind of user out or give users, end users of the dashboard ways to filter this in and out as they need to.
Yeah, one approach that we could try looking into is filtered search, but I feel like that's probably what we'll end up with is a more tokenized search where you create, say, date ranges and narrow into and focus into the specific data that you want to see, and then it creates a token that is then easily removable. I believe I've seen that on like some of the very early MVC designs for our dashboards, and it's usually what we have on like audit events and stuff that has like complex or a lot of searches.
So that's like a previous search that you could apply to the current data set?
Yeah, so basically, like similar to what we have on our MRs page, we'd have a input box here. You would click on it, and one of the tokens would be users, for example, and then it would be all users or only like exclude anonymous users. And then we could maybe even move the date range into that, but I don't know if we yet have a token for that. So it might be early, but that could be our direction. And I think it's just worth noting to say that, you know, that solves the issue of like, how does this scale? So we can be kind of like rough with our design right now and just get something in that works, and then it will scale eventually, because I feel like once we get to like a certain critical mass, we can collapse all of those into a tokenized search.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just tokenized search wasn't a term I was familiar with, but now that you've explained it, that makes a ton of sense. That's a good way to, instead of layering a bunch of filters, push them into kind of one user experience or one interface. I like that. Cool. Okay. Well, yeah, I think that for the MVC, just adding a filter or some sort of checkbox, some sort of simple interface with a modal and some help text about what it is will be a good first step, and then we can always iterate on that. Cool.
That's good.
Let's look at the other one then, and I'll update this with some of that direction as well. Of going forward, we think that we'll switch over to that kind of tokenized search, which follows the pattern that we have for things like jobs and MRs and issues to collapse the things that make sense. And then also wanted to look at the usage quota MVC and my super rough wireframe here. I built this based on the existing group usage quota page. So showing how many events you consumed, which we think that billing will be happening based on events. So it's very similar to like CI credits or CI minutes, as they used to be called. So a lot of this is modeled after that. And so there'll be on that usage quota page a new tab for product analytics events, total processed events since whatever that last billing date is. At some point, we're going to need a year picker drop down. That was something we ran into in Verify. We hard coded for just the current year, and then we rolled over on the calendar year. Oops. But that interface is there for us to reuse. And then within under that, a usage by month. And so one of my first questions for the technical side of the development team is, what is easier for the MVC? Is getting all of the individual projects back that are in the group and using product analytics, or getting all of the group usage back and showing it as an aggregate? Eventually, we want to do both, and we want to push that project level down into the project itself. But for our first iteration of this, having it in the group usage quota page is where it's going to live to start. So we'll want to show both of those, which one is going to be the easier to get, and then we can iterate and show the other, either the sum of those or the individual projects usage on this page.
I guess it's a answer of it depends, and it depends on how difficult it is or how expensive it is to actually calculate these. I may be completely wrong here, so don't quote me on this, but I think for some of our other usage quotas, we use essentially cron jobs to go and calculate that data beforehand, like once off, and then show you that calculation instead of trying to fetch it, which I think for something like the number of events, that also makes a lot of sense. Especially on this page, if you want to like scope it down to seeing the number of events for multiple months, that's going to be quite an expensive number of queries to run.
Yeah.
So it depends on how we basically get that data. But I think it's important, at least technically, to cut out the MVC and also the final vision so that we don't, because I know from talks that I've seen in issues with like usage quotas that some of our engineering around this has kind of like made future expansion like difficult. And that's easily the case when you're working with like compiling data in like jobs like that. So I think like having the end vision in mind is going to be important here, so that we know like, okay, eventually we need to be able to answer like these sorts of questions.
Yeah. I can better fill out some of the end vision for this. The big things that stick out to me as far as vision is it always needs to match up with what your bill is going to show. So it should be pulling data from the same place and staying in sync. The other is longer term, it'd be great to be able to project usage. So while you're using product analytics for a while and maybe your usage is flat, if one of your apps starts to tick up, we can then project on a chart simply or in some sort of complex, super smart AI way. Hey, here's what it's going to look like your bill might be at the end of the month. And that's based off of, these new trends or things that are happening. Your number of users is up and the number of events is up. So it's going to tick up. But being able to do that long term, I think it's going to be really helpful for customers who are trying to project what their bill is going to be. And it's something that we can then push back into other product analytics areas as well, or we can take out of product analytics, kind of that projected trend into the future. So it's a nice add-on for us, both here in usage quota and in our own dashboards. So
yeah, I think all of that sounds doable and reasonable. I think technically the biggest challenge is just going to be just implementing a way of calculating this data each month and running probably a job in the background or something. But who knows? Turns out the query might be super easy and we can start off without that.
Yeah. I mean, I know I say single source of truth, and that's probably going to be ClickHouse for this data. But at some point, do we see, especially for historic data, like that's not going to change again, pulling that into GitLab so it's faster to retrieve and you're not having to go to the ClickHouse database to get how many events were processed 6 months ago, because that number shouldn't be changing.
Exactly. That's exactly what I have in mind in terms of looking at the ClickHouse data once and then storing that result so that we can very easily and quickly just return that.
Yeah, okay, cool. Well, I'll update some vision on this one as well, so that we can kind of think forward with the architecture of how we're going to build it and what things we might want to build on top of. So yeah, super helpful. Cool. Well, anything else you want to talk through today? Are there open issues in the current milestone that we should look at or discuss?
Nothing that comes to mind, no.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll give everybody some time back then, and it'll be a fast recording for other folks to watch. All right, thanks.
Great.
Have a great day.
Goodbye.
Cheers.